This is Making Better Decisions. I'm your host, Ryan Sullivan. Decisions are where rubber meets the road for organizations. Each week, we'll be learning from people who are on the front lines of turning raw data into better outcomes for their organizations. This show is sponsored by Canopy Analytic, helping companies make better decisions using data. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Making Better Decisions podcast. Today's guest did his undergrad in electrical engineering, then went to Cornell for an MBA. He's accumulated almost 25 years worth of experience in data and analytics with a focus in the healthcare industry. He's consulted for SAMA and Deloitte before going into industry at McKesson. He was a data science fellow at Insights Data Science and holds an advisory council seat at Kraft Ventures. Please welcome Global Director and Head of the Data and Analytics Portfolio at Hewlett Packard Enterprises, Parag Shrivastava. How are you, Parag?
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for the warm introduction. Really appreciate, and thanks for hosting me on this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for taking the time to come on and talk to me and all the listeners. So, what is one thing you wish more people knew about using data to make better decisions?
Yeah, I think, Ryan, when it comes to, it's a great question to start with. And most of us are now dealing with data and AI. But one thing probably I would focus on is driving the business outcomes and the last mile delivery. I think that is a very, very big thing because data is very powerful, like as they say, and the data-driven insights make the things happen. So the question there lies is how can we really make it implemented in the companies that we are working for? And that is what I call last mile delivery. For example, one of the big rollouts that we did for our sales team members was for optimizing their productivity. And it is by giving them insight of single plane of view for customer insights and providing insights and recommendations there. But the last mile delivery is how the sales teams will use it, as well as at the same time, like how will they benefit, how much productivity will they gain in the real terms. So I would encourage all the data practitioners, fellow data practitioners, to focus on business outcome as well as the last mile delivery.
I like this advice a lot. It obviously is a balancing act, and I kind of know, what you mean there, but it feels to me like there's a lot of emphasis sometimes placed on, is the storage the most cutting edge, fastest IO, lowest, movement, right? There's all of these kind of infrastructural concerns, which sometimes matter, sometimes don't. Obviously, cleaning matters to a certain degree, but as you mentioned, that last mile is really where any return on investment for a data initiative is going to be realized. It's kind of everybody cares about the faucet, nobody cares about the plumbing in their walls. So, how can an organization strike that balance a little bit better of not over focusing on the infrastructure, but also not missing anything? So, hey, we have a really pretty faucet, but the water coming out of it is, dangerous to drink.
No, I think it's a very good question. I think with the enormous data that the companies have right now, it's super important that the companies maintain their focus and the data leaders and the data teams maintain what the priority is. So, for example, we were taking the example of a faucet, and probably like there are many ways to design a faucet. It can go around the house or it can go under the house or how it comes. What really matters is our company able to deliver the water that's required out of that faucet? And so having an eye and to that point, like, is the water high quality or not? So, like you said, there should be like a very high quality water that we are able to supply. So in that kind of a scenario, it's super important to start upfront and understand what exactly do we need. For example, what are we going to transform? Are we going to improve a workflow? Are we going to completely transform the business model? Are we achieving certain business outcomes? So understanding that point where what is required, if that is understood, then the effort for the whole infrastructure setup and the plumbing can be more guided, and the resources and the energy which are finite in the companies can be more appropriately used. And that's what I have seen as a success factor, where there is a clear definition of done, and also like a alignment with our business teams. uh, in those kind of situations, having that right focus on data infrastructure has helped to deliver the projects correctly.
Yeah. So I think another element of focusing on that last mile is around the human element, whether that's talking about adoption or training or psychological bias, or sometimes, unfortunately, some of the, interdepartmental or intercompany politics. What advice do you have for data professionals who really want to realize that impact and know that, those are mountains we have to climb for how to get there?
Yeah, I think one of the other big piece about data is the whole data storytelling and making the information simple and consumable. Because we as data professionals think more in terms of the building the infrastructure, but it is that ease of use of that final output that matters a lot. Is your dashboard or is the metric that you are showcasing, is it actionable? Can Is it easy to understand? Can people understand the trends, the graph, the information that you're trying to show them? It's super important that our reports have that, or the reports, dashboards, analytics have that human touch in them. Wherever we are integrating with applications and using APIs for that matter, those integrations are simple. Application users are able to use the information. uh, I think those are some of the big things. The other piece I would say, which one of the initiatives that I led, was like personalization services. Now in this case, it is not very apparent to the user that some of the information is personalized, but for example, giving personalized recommendations, personalized content, personalization of product recommendations, all these things are making it very easy for users to consume the information. I think is super key. So in way I see, if I look at like the whole vertical stack, the user interface, the analytics, the data, and the source system, they all are like vertically integrated and they all flow from top to down.
You've mentioned a couple of the really big initiatives that you've been a part of. Obviously, I think that this comes with the territory, having achieved some of the positions that you have, but also having been a consultant for as many years as you were. We kind of have the opportunity as consultants to hot drop into some of these crazy scenarios, be part of rapid transformation. Um, I think one of the biggest difficulties that a lot of people have with consultants is as soon as it's over, we're like, all right, well, hope it goes well. See you later. So, like, when you get to be a part of some of these initiatives, as a member of industry, you get the opportunity to kind of see them through and make sure that they all work. So, you've had both of those experiences. Having gone through massive changes over the course of your career and kind of, in many cases, orchestrating a lot of those massive changes, what advice do you have around change management?
So change management, as I if I look at any transformation or any a program for that perspective, I look at it in three phases. One is where you are actually doing the ideation or why that program is required. Second is the actual execution of that program, and third is what's the ongoing phase or sustenance phase of it, which is operations, if you will. The change management comes in all the three areas. When we are doing the ideation, it's important that we apply some of the practices, for example, like design thinking, or for that matter, like getting the collaboration of the people to get really do the ideation on what are we trying to do, what's our business goal, what's our business outcome, what are the targets or objective key results, OKRs, we are setting for ourselves. So that's super important. As we move into the execution, getting the users into the system early is super important, because obviously the waterfall type of models that used to exist before, or even like the transformation that that will take some time and then will be rolled out to users. That those kind of changes are no longer valid. It's more about like eating the bread by slice, or you can say more like, if you will, making those incremental changes, but significant changes. For example, like if you are transforming to uh, a certain thing, like for example, changing from traditional sales to as a service sale, taking product by product category, how we are doing it, how we are rolling it out. I think those type of changes are super important. So in this kind of a phase, getting the users involved early in testing and adoption and getting their feedback to continuously improve the product is super important. So that's how I would say, like the middle phase, which is execution and change management, is here super important, because the more user feedback companies are able to take, the projects are able to take, the better the product it is. Once it goes into operations, being top of operations is super important too, because now users are really using it. Making sure that their net promoter score, we are able to measure it, whether it's high or low. Obviously it doesn't matter, like if it is low we have to improve it, if it is high we have to obviously sustain it. So making sure that the NPS continues, is measured, the user feedback is taken, the users who are embracing for this kind of transformation or this change, they are using it, they are part of the whole journey, is super important. So I think those are the main things I would say. Change management is across the board, in all the three phases: ideation, execution, and operations. And the users and the uh, customers play a big role in all these phases.
Yeah, my experience has been agile has turned into a little bit of a dirty word. It's kind of gotten hijacked and is used in a lot of situations. So people are like, hey, we're going to be really agile here. It's like, oh, so you mean you're going to move the goalposts, not tell anybody anything? But I think some of the ideas out of that methodology around exactly what you said. We need a lot of communication. We need a lot of feedback. We need to start those processes early. And we need to have some sort of method where we're connecting the people who are prioritizing what gets made or changed and the people who are doing the making and the changing with what is currently happening, like what the business needs are at all times, right? So obviously we have to have some structure around that. Otherwise, nothing ever gets in the end zone. But I think that that's absolutely fantastic advice. I think most of the data initiatives, whether it's a huge new platform rollout or a big infrastructural project like a lake or a warehouse or anything like that, the ones that I see die are the ones where we decide that we're going to go out, we're going to ask a bunch of questions, we're going to figure out, gather the requirements, and then we go in a cave for 2 years and try to build something. And when people come out of the cave, if they even make it 2 years, it's not really what anybody needs anymore.
Totally.
And what happens more often than not is you make it 8 months into the project and someone's like, wait, we're spending how much money? Where do these people live? Oh, we stuffed them, in a basement somewhere. Like, nah, forget it. And it gets hatcheted. So I'm curious, as a part of that change management, what advice you have for how we can show incremental value along the way? Because obviously the change and the development happens over time. But if it takes too long, things, get the hatchet. How can we show value and keep the initiatives moving?
Yeah, I think three things I would say. One is obviously making sure that the people are appraised about the progress, what's happening.
Yeah. Yep.
Second is making sure that the blockers that come for the project have the right visibility too.
Mm.
So we are able to, like, we are able to get help from wherever it's possible. For example, if in a data initiative we are stuck on the definition of certain thing, like how do we measure, for example, suppose ARR, uh, how do we do it? And so getting the right people involved, right teams engaged, if there really needs to be a council, setting up that council, making sure things happen. So I think bringing those blockers is another big thing. Third piece I would say is doing it like totally transparent and honest way. I think that is one of the biggest things I have seen is ensuring that we are very diligent to making progress. We are very diligent to resolving the blockers and being very transparent on where the state of the product is, showing the demos. This is where we have reached. This is where we are. So it's like building that community around that project, like who are the supporters for that particular project, and making sure that there is clear outcome and delivery on each of the small phases, I think will be the key to success. And that also helps company to realize that what the business values are coming out. So what we have achieved, can we start using something? For example, if we are developing a metric for financial analysis and we are looking at bookings, billing, shipment, backlog, these type of information, everything doesn't need to come at once. Booking, billing, shipment, backlog, revenue, P&L doesn't need to come in the beginning. You can have bookings first and showcase those what the trends of bookings are at at the billing that you have, at the shipments. So it's always incremental progress, which I think is very critical for any data or AI initiative. Like if you have to generate machine ML algorithms based on certain trends of the data, how do we do it? I think it's super important that we just incrementally keep doing it, ML or AI or even the data analytics.
Yeah. So obviously you're currently at HP, and that is a slightly different ball of wax, but a huge portion of your career was spent in healthcare and health tech. My experience has been that that's an industry that has a really complicated relationship with data, right? Obviously, healthcare, I would argue, is one of the more uh, science driven, at least one would hope, but science driven parts, industries out there in the market. On the other hand, we have a lot of control, security, governance around HIPAA regulations and patient confidentiality and all of those things. So I always like when I have the opportunity to talk to someone that's spent a considerable amount of time in the healthcare sector around, what are a couple quick pieces of advice for any listener who might be in that sector about navigating it and using data as much as we can to continue keeping healthcare very data driven without getting too bogged down in some of the compliance stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's a great question. And actually, healthcare is a very fascinating area. It's a very, very vast area. So my like most recent experience has been in pharmaceutical supply chain. Like you can, somebody will say like peer, provider, pharma, patients. Those are the main components. But I would even say like even supply chain. So McKesson was a company where it was like almost one third of North America and Europe's pharmacy comes from McKesson supply chain. Now, in that kind of a scenario, McKesson obviously was a very fast company in terms of implementation of technologies because it's really making sure that the supply chain continues, right? I mean, all the pharmacy that you receive, the medicines that you receive at the hospital, the medical supplies, they are like table stakes for patient care. So that is a very, very high tech area. How we optimize our warehouses, our the supply chain, the cash, the margins, and other kind of things. So contracts with almost like 5,000 pharma manufacturing companies with several customers, retail stores such as Walmart and others. So I think that is a big technology area. The other organizations I've worked with, that include patient care and also the payer space, they also happen to be very cutting edge. Kaiser Permanente was one of the big ones that implemented Epic system as a cutting edge EHR system. Stanford Healthcare became one of the first hospitals in the nation to achieve HIMSS Stage 7 designation. So they are cutting edge too. My advice to healthcare data analytics fellow professionals would be that obviously the table stakes are going to be like how the we have the PII and PHI covered. But once we have that covered, I think the potential is tremendous and people are waiting for it because there is so much. First of all, I think cost in healthcare. So cost reduction, cost optimization is a big thing. Second one, I would say, is just improving the patient care and the quality of patient care is another big thing. So whatever teams are engaged in healthcare, I think one thing they're doing great work for the service of the community, but at the same time, the potential of using technology is huge, where data AI can plays a big role, obviously.
Yeah, I actually I wanted to take us there anyways when you talked about supply chain. Um, Supply chain and logistics at large is something that I have had the opportunity to engage in a few consulting engagements around. I actually was also pretty focused on folks that were involved in the Walmart supply chain and, were, providers there and had to crunch like massive retail link reports and trying to make sure that everything's in all the distribution centers. And as a brain computer science math problem, I find logistics and supply chain to be some of the most interesting because it's so complicated. It's not one of those things where it's like, oh, there's one formula that dictates because the networks are too complicated. And it's not one of those things where you even in theory could brute force a solution and decide on a perfect optimal solution. So it is one of those areas where you really get a playground for all of these, modern cutting edge tools to constantly be tweaking another, 1, 2, 3% of efficiency and less downtime and holding inventory a little bit shorter. Um, Obviously, you mentioned one of the big things, right? How critical the supply chain is. So I want to be clear, the supply chains, particularly in America, are generally incredible, right? Like it's very infrequent that we have one of those situations. They do happen here and there where it's just like you can't get it. Sorry, you just can't. We don't have it right now, and it really highlights how important supply chains are. But assuming we're not having a critical outage of some kind, talk to me a little bit about how you think some of the cutting edge tools, whether they are, um, just data and analytics using modern technologies, whether it's maybe a machine learning algorithm that's been around for a while, or some of the new AI LLM stuff that's come out. How can we use that to improve and optimize supply chains?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, great question. And I'll give it from my practical example or the project that I ran. This was McKesson acquired another pharmaceutical distribution called Celesio in Europe. And one of the big thing was how do we get synergy in supply chain between these two companies? Because that was like one of the big things because when acquisitions happen, there is a rationale for that acquisition. So McKesson was very big in North America. Celesio was very big in Europe, and now it became McKesson Europe. So combining those two, one of the first things comes in supply chain is our supplier relationships. And when we talk about supplier relationships, like how can we do harmonization of suppliers, negotiate the new volumes with the suppliers, and negotiate the contracts with the suppliers. So setting up those volumes, contract pricing upfront with the suppliers, I think creating those terms becomes super, super important. And our data analytics really helped a lot. All of our team that was sitting in London used heavy data analytics for making sure that there is a uh, good synergy solution that is developed for negotiation with suppliers. After this is done on an ongoing operations basis, it's super important that we do the demand planning well because many of those contracts are written in such a way that the better the demand forecast is, the higher pricing you can, the better pricing you can get from the supplier. So I think it helps the whole chain, if you will, to look at like if you can give the demand early, then the production can be optimized. So that's the second piece. And then the third piece is all about looking at the warehouse optimizations. Which warehouse do we put in?
Yeah.
Where will some of those inventories should be? How much inventory to keep in what warehouse? What are the products that can return? So, like, what is the likelihood of returns? What type of products are returning, getting returned? Can we take a proactive action on them? So, it's a huge initiative where data analytics has helped in all the three dimensions. Like, one is building the total supplier network and supplier relationships, doing the demand planning, so we know, like, we can give a lead to our customers. Once the supply comes in, then making sure our warehouses are optimized, we have the right mechanism, we are identifying the product defects, product returns, taking appropriate actions as a supply chain is continuing to run an operation.
Man, you keep teeing up great questions. So, um, I won't say any names, but a previous podcast guest and I worked together on a dashboard at one point around a supply chain negotiation, right? So it was like basically going into a price negotiation. And, I tell you, there's really no better sales pitch for having analytics than going into a negotiation. And the concept of putting together a dashboard or something that is interactive where you can, as you're having a conversation with someone, be clicking on things and seeing, okay, well, if I give up 2 cents a unit over here, does that help me over here? And you can really just tie somebody in a knot in a negotiation because you're outsourcing so much of the thinking during those negotiations to the numbers. And it allows you, anytime you're in a pressure cooker, to make decisions fast. Having analytics prepared is at its most valuable, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really, really good point, I think, Ryan. And second thing is also, there is very clear, it's a data-driven decision. It's not
Yes.
based on emotions. I think it's a good thing for both the supplier as well as the buyer for the supply chain.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious before we start wrapping up to get your opinion of, some of the tools that are out there. Let me kind of set the table on that ask because that's pretty vague. Most of my career has been dedicated to what, like a hardcore data scientist or ML or AI engineer would consider pedestrian, right? I went off, I have a degree in math. I sold out a little bit because the only thing I do now is add and divide and make pictures and databases and all that kind of stuff. And that was kind of by choice. I feel that there's a lot of impact that can be made there, and that takes nothing away from the impact of some of these other tools. But one of the things that I do preach is kind of the right tool for the right job. So I think as of right now, LLMs are the big shiny thing. So we're slapping LLMs on every problem, whether that's the right solution or not. And that's cool. That's how human beings are, right? We overreact and we get excited with shiny things, and LLMs are definitely shiny and they're getting shinier every day. They're very cool. But the question that I'd like to pose to you more specifically is, what are some of the situations right now, some of the use cases and the tools that match them? So like if we're dealing with this type of situation, go with an LLM. If we're going with this type of situation, use, a machine learning algorithm. Help us with a little bit of your experience, know, when to use a hammer and when to use a wrench.
Yeah, sure. I think if we look at AI, I think there are two parts of AI. One is the traditional machine learning, and which is super helpful. For example, all the examples I gave you, where getting the information together for, like, customer personalization, for example, recommended content, recommended product, recommended training, getting the information together. It's all machine learning driven. Customer segmentation, customer clustering, these are all machine learning driven, and they have been super helpful in enabling the workforce making the quick decisions in terms of this. Now, where LLM comes into picture is more about, like, adding more context to it. So all the models that currently exist, for example, recommendations, can we gather other information and also enrich that information from outside, synthesize it within the model. The other way, so that's where it's a like combination of traditional machine learning and LLM. For example, if I were to give you some cases where an executive report, uh, like an AI executive agent, you can think about, or an executive report that is generated, it has the matrix around booking, billing, shipment, backlog, or whichever is your company metric that exists for the company, the core KPIs. Now, what if an LLM agent comes in and augments that information with external information, or creates a summary out of that particular report? Those are some of the powerful things to look at, especially like as we look at some of the agent related stuff. So the way I would think about implementing agents and LLM in the context of the companies would be, number one is you can think about optimizing certain workflows. So for example, like if I am generating like product catalogs on a day-to-day basis, can I use large language model to generate basic product catalog for me, and then I can enhance it further? So it's like improving productivity. That's, I think, is one of the table stakes. But fundamentally, there's also an opportunity at this point to think a little bit different. It's like, can I transform the whole business model that exists? So, for example, like if I'm one is definitely companies will make workflow by workflow changes, but can the new company be created with AI? And that will be like a totally game changer or different. For example, if a company is managing contracts, for example, now and helps other companies to manage that contract, can this whole contract management, contract optimization piece, can it be automated? Can AI do it? And it's a new company, new branding model, just like how some of the revolutions have happened in the transportation. Like now you go from place A to place B with Uber, Lyft, for example, that matter, or some online home delivery of food or other items has started. So it's fundamentally changing with this model. So I think we as data professionals need to look at both. One is continue to make productivity improvements across our user base in the value chain that we are in, for example, in finance and sales and supply chain for that matter. And second is also keep thinking about like how the business models can change as well.
Wow. I love ending on that note because it's so much more than the original question around like, oh, okay, like what are these tools good for? It's like, well, they're good for reimagining the entire business landscape. I don't know if I can top that.
Yeah.
That's such a great point. All right. So, Parag, we had the opportunity to learn from you, and I know I'm going to be leaving with my head still spinning from that last quote that you just gave me. Give us the opportunity to learn a little bit about you.
Yeah, no, I think certainly, I mean, data analytics, AI continues to be my passion. But as part of this passion is also community as well, right? So I think one of the key things, because I'm product of this community, so I think that is one big thing. So on my personal front, I would say uh, I'm fortunate to live in a tri valley, like in a valley area, which is close to San Francisco. So I happen to have a lot of mountains and hills nearby. So one of the key things I keep doing is hiking, and where I get free time to just go and relax and enjoy. I think that's one of the big things. Second is contributing back to communities through some of our scout programs. I mean, Boy the Scout is a big thing that I found really, really grows the character of our children. So my son became an Eagle Scout. So that was a big thing for me personally. Contributing to Boy Scout, being part of that community is a big thing. I mean, those are the things that keep me busy outside of the work, and being being part of the whole ecosystem and community. I think contributing back.
I absolutely love that. I was a Boy Scout growing up, and I say all the time that some of the most impactful memories that I have from my childhood are like standing on the top of a mountain someplace with like a bunch of my friends and or sometimes, slogging up the side of one, definitely taught me a lot about grit and perseverance and payoff and all of those things. And, you just get to see, like you mentioned, some of the natural beauty that, being a computer nerd at heart, it's great to have that opportunity to get out, go camping, go hiking, see the mountains, spend some time outside. I absolutely love that. I couldn't agree more. So if anybody's loved what you had to say, wants to collaborate with you on something or reach out and learn a little bit more, what are some of the best ways to reach out and connect with you?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn would be one of the best ways in which they can reach out, and happy to collaborate. You can find me with the first and last name. Happy to collaborate.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Parag, this has been, I don't know any other phrase for it, but like mind expanding, like the conciseness that you were able to talk about really complicated ideas that are on the fringe. It just speaks to, how much experience you have helping organizations move through a lot of this stuff and think about it. And it makes it clear exactly what you said, that this is a passion for you. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing some of your time and sharing your passion and all the effort you put into it with me and the listeners. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Ryan, and thank you for being such a great host. Thank you for this wonderful interaction.
Thank you so much. I also want to make sure that I thank our audience, especially if you've made it all the way through the episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please make sure to tell a friend, give us a review, like, subscribe, all of that stuff. I know everybody tells you to like and subscribe to all of their stuff, but you really shouldn't listen to them. You should just listen to us and subscribe to this podcast because it's awesome. Thank you so much for listening and for being a great audience. We love hearing from you guys. Feel free to reach out anytime. Parag, I want to thank you one more time. And this has been another episode of the Making Better Decisions podcast. Thanks for listening. That's a wrap for today's episode of Making Better Decisions. For show notes and more, visit makingbetterdecisions.live. A special thank you to our sponsor, Canopy Analytic. Canopy Analytic is a boutique consultancy focused on business intelligence and data engineering. They help companies make better decisions using data. For more information, visit canopyanalytic.com. There's a better way. Let's find it together and make better decisions. Thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you next week. Peace.